many of you know from recent experiences, understanding Mexico's financial system in this changing world can be more than difficult. Today, we will hear from one of two experts in the next 2 weeks about what we can learn from recent situations with Intercam, Cbanco, and other Mexican financial institutions under scrutiny. Javier Ortega-Araiza is a friend of mine, is a journalist, entrepreneur, and investor with a background spanning finance, media, education, and international business. He is the managing director of Life, Relocated, Relocated, which specializes in relocation services in the financial and legal landscape, and Mountain Brook Enterprises, where he develops immersive travel experiences for special interest groups. In finance, Javier has worked in equity research and the family office sector with practical financial training at the London Metal Exchange and the Chicago Board Option Exchange. That's it's kind of cute. Bloomberg and the Madrid Stock Exchange, where he trained in derivatives markets. In education, he has scaled ventures in the educational travel sector, including co-founding a seven-figure company that connected students and professionals with finance, technology, and entrepreneur ecosystems in more than 50 countries. In journalism, Javier has contributed to publications including the Canadian Press, the New York Post, Business Insider, Fox Money, the Toronto Star, and the Vancouver Sun. Please help me welcome Javier to the Rotary podium today.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? I also rely on paper a little bit. Thank you for having me here. Through my family growing up, a lot of my extended family went on Rotary exchanges, so it's always a pleasure to be connected. And it's also great to see people from different adopted homes of mine. I spent some time in Mountain Brook, close to Birmingham, Alabama. We just came back from Vancouver, San Diego. I moved here from San Diego the last time, so it's great to be here and to talk about a topic that has been in the agenda for a long time now. It's going to be a year since we had the news that Intercam and CI Banco and other institutions stopped functioning, and we still keep getting questions, and a lot of questions actually. And before I start, I'm just going to tell you a personal story. So I was an Intercam client for over 15 years. And last year in June, at the beginning of June, we registered a company in Las Vegas in the US, and we had to go through a year-long process to get an Intercam account opened for our US business. And it was approved on June 3rd, 2025, and the account lasted 22 days because on the 25th I could no longer use it. So if you think this is a banking story, I mean, this is way beyond banking, and as we cover the different topics, the financial system is becoming simpler in some ways, but very complex in other ways. And this is not just only about Mexico. It's a global situation, largely having to do with the eruption of technology and AI and a lot of automation. I think the financial system, it's largely going to evolve in that direction. So we need to be prepared as to how to deal with it and what to do in that regard. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of my background, I mean, as Joe was saying, I come from the finance world, and then I started a travel business, which I still have had for 16 years. The initial concept was connecting students to financial ecosystems, mostly New York, London, and Chicago. So we would take students from business schools on 1 week immersions, when during that week they would take lectures, but instead of taking them at a university, they would take them at financial institutions. So we work with JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Barclays, all the banks, basically, and asset management and other firms. And then that business gradually evolved into, they said, can you do a program for advertising? Can you run a trade mission to China? Can you do this? So we grew that venture. So I have to deal with cross-border payments all the time, and it's very often a nightmare, and it's still a nightmare, and it will keep being a nightmare. But it's part of what we have to deal with, and hopefully the talk today helps to give some clarity. In addition, through the travel company, I am also the founder of a relocation business, which in the time that elapsed between February and now is no longer mine. We've transferred the ownership of that business to a person who worked on our team, who is a San Miguel native. So we've created a business here locally that now runs independently, and I'm very proud about that, to help entrepreneurs. And as an entrepreneur myself, it's always great to be able to be a part of those stories. So I've come to San Miguel since 2018. I started coming seasonally, first from Toronto, where I was living at the time. And then over time, as I fell in love with San Miguel, then had to move to California, then came for a month last July, and I'm still here, and this is home now. So it's a pleasure to be here. So this is one of the most important things to understand about what's going on in the financial system right now. Before we talk about Intercam or anything, and if you have questions, I'll try to leave as much time for questions as possible. But in some ways, technology, if you have to send $500 through Wise, you can do that possibly in 2 or 3 seconds. If you have to send $50,000, it's a different story, and you might have to wait 30 or 40 or 60 days if you are a new customer, depending on the platform you are using and how you are handling that. So there are two main reasons why larger transactions have become more complicated in my experience. The first one is geopolitical instability and a lot of suspicion about transactions between countries. So when Intercam and CI Banco were shut down, the main transactions that were flagged were Mexican transfers being sent to China. And the reason that happened was because the US government said that it was the fentanyl trade that these banks were helping facilitate payments to China. So I work with China. We plan trade missions to China, and to even get a supplier verification to send a $3,000 payment, sometimes you have to wait a week or longer before you can even get approved to send the money. So that geopolitical factor, if you were dealing, we've run programs in Israel, in the United Arab Emirates, in a lot of different countries that are under scrutiny right now if you send any type of transaction. So that will likely continue, and the only thing you can really do is, as banks become more familiar with your transaction patterns, then it becomes easier down the line. And this is because the other part is automation. So 15 years ago, when I started this business, I could go to the branch, and a lot of the decisions, whether to get a loan, to get a cross-border transaction done, to deposit cash, a lot of it relied on the human judgment of the person working at the bank, and they had the faculty and the power to override any type of system automated decision. That is harder and harder now, because a lot of the times what happens is when you click send or when you do anything, no human sees that. It all gets flagged by an automated system, largely more and more powered by AI. And AI is trained by humans, so humans make mistakes, and AI makes more. So even though it's a great tool, I use it all the time, but there is a lot we have to get ready, because the process of getting AI to become a fully functional technology into the banking system or any type of system, especially when we're dealing with organizations that are so large, banks, governments, regulators, it's a lot of a trial and error process and a lot of day-to-day customers will get affected. And the best thing you can do is really to expect that will happen and just know what to do when that happens instead of expecting it won't. Uh, because so a lot of it is automated flags. Is a transaction out of your usual patterns? Are you sending money to a new person or to a new business? Is it a country that you don't have a history with? A lot of those things, sometimes it may be a completely innocent transaction, but because it falls under the system's algorithm to flag it, it will flag it. And then a lot of institutions now are cutting down on their human footprint. So that's another thing we will talk about is how do you choose a financial institution? Well, I mean, to begin with, choose one where you can talk to a person. And then, um, so just briefly, as I said, I mean, I know I've had a lot of stories about what happened with these banks, and a lot of the time, as it happens with any topic, there's a lot of misinformation. But basically, I mean, there hasn't been. I, I'm not here to say whether these banks were guilty of what they were accused of, but as I said, the main flag was that they were helping facilitate money laundering to China on behalf of the cartels. And why that allegation was possible has to do with what I'm about to say. I loved Intercam. I wouldn't have banked with them for 15 years. And the reason is they were willing to accommodate almost anything. You know, like I had clients, for example, for trade missions to China, and they would say, okay, can I pay in US dollars in cash, in Querétaro? We would go pick up the money, bring it to Intercam. They would take it and wire it to China. I don't know what they did behind the scenes. I don't know how that was made possible, but as a customer, you love that flexibility. You know, they would take US checks and clear them the next day sometimes if you had a history with them. It's a huge risk for the bank to do that. I just had a check with Bank of America held for 45 days because he was a new person and the system thought that there was a risk of fraud, and they have up to 30 or more days to report the transaction, so the bank is protecting itself. How can you not love a bank that solves all your problems without asking how or why? You know, but because the system, as I said, is becoming more automated, there's less and less room for those types of human exceptions. You know, I mean, how many stories have we had? The founder of a company in 20, 30, 40 years ago persuaded the manager of a branch to get a loan to get started. Try getting a loan at a bank here doing that. It's very hard. They will say, no, we can't do it because the system won't let us. So a lot of the human judgment has been stripped out of the equation until they have to intervene with a particular case. That this is partly also what I'm here to talk about next. So compliance is becoming stricter and stricter, as I said, largely because there are algorithms in place. There's a lot of suspicion and need to identify who is really behind each transaction. So it's harder and harder to get flexibility, which is why institutions that offer still that human presence are very, very valuable. I think in the next few years, we're going to see that financial institutions are going to realize they cannot be entirely automated. There's a lot of human judgment that comes with money. I mean, how do you know your client? What's the risk profile? What's their investment profile? You know, what you cannot, as we go through the hiccups of adopting technology, I think more and more, ideally, those good financial institutions, we're going to see they have humans who use technology to help them, but those that rely entirely on technology, I don't think they're going to last very long because the number of problems, and I don't know if any of you is familiar with Stripe, uh, which is a company that helps process businesses, they help process credit card payments. I mean, sometimes they add value, but it's very hard to reach a human there. And sometimes when I reach to a customer agent at Stripe, they have some weird name that I think, is this really a name or is it a bot power by AI and a human avatar? So human support, I think, will matter most than ever. I mean, I do think eventually, if they want to keep their clients, institutions are going to realize that. And now, before we get further, I'm going to cover a topic that a lot of, I've heard this question quite a bit. Is there an economic war against Mexico? Because sometimes people say that. I've heard that say many times. I don't know what everybody thinks. I think there's not. That what had to do with the banks has nothing to do with the US waging war against Mexico. It has all to do with the financial system becoming more unified and automated globally and expelling those institutions that still have a lot of side room that do not fully adapt to that partly. But I was just reading this morning that the US and Mexico have almost 900 billion trading relationship. That's twice as much as China, and it's more than Canada. So they are very interdependent, and I don't think, I mean, sometimes we hear headlines, the Tesla plant was canceled in Monterrey or whatever else that sensationalizes the topic, but in reality, I mean, the investment hasn't stopped. The US foreign direct investment in Mexico is still as high as it has been in a lot of fields, and Mexico's dependence also on exporting to America still on the day to day. There's still a lot going on. So, and I think this actually will grow. I mean, since 21, we started hearing the term nearshoring. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but there's been a lot of talk about it for over 5 years. And as companies realize, well, initially they went maybe to China or Taiwan or India or other countries in Asia. Yes, they may have offered a lower cost initially, but there's a lot of other factors that drove the nearshoring: geographical proximity, time zone, culture. The languages are not that different compared to speaking Mandarin or something else. So I think I don't think we're going to see a war. I think we're going to see pressure from the US government in some topics. I mean, I was born in the state of Chihuahua. Possibly you've heard of that there were 3 CIA agents who were found dead there because Chihuahua is ruled by another party different than the federal government in Mexico. So we may see pressure around that, but I don't think there is an economic war, and I think the relationship between both countries is just going to continue growing, even if the media often says otherwise. So in this regard, should you open a bank account in Mexico? Well, I think it's always helpful to have a bank account in the country where you live in. I mean, the only times when I've lived in a country and haven't had a bank account there is when for some type of government regulation, I haven't been able to open one. But, even now I have an American bank account, a Canadian, a Mexican bank account, a European bank account. I think if you live here, there is a case to have an account in the place where you are. Now, that doesn't mean move all your money here. Not at all. Because sometimes when I say this, it's like, oh, so you want me to move all your money to Mexico and Actimba disappeared with the millions or monarchs or whatever? No. Opening a bank account is very different from investing all your money in one country. I wouldn't say invest all your money in any country. If you can diversify, why not? I mean, now it's easier than it's ever been to diversify. As complicated as some things are, it's also easier to have an account in other countries, especially if you have a citizenship or residency in or some type of interest. So I think if you pay, bills here, staff here, rent here, property taxes, whatever, it helps to have a local account that allows you to, I mean, even just reduce the exposure to the currency fluctuations with combat. US dollar 20 still, and it's 17, sometimes 16 something, 18 something. It's not great. So it helps to also build a history and to give, let's say, the system confidence in your transaction patterns in the country where you live in. And I think it's very important to have that. And diversification, I mean, also good. Uh, I mean, I'm going to skip through some of the slides because they can be a bit more technical, but basically is how can you move money around from one country to another? And I welcome your questions when the time comes for that, but I'll just there are different ways, and this is another question that comes up. How do I get money from the US to Mexico, for instance? So there is a bank now, and I don't work for any bank. I just want to make that clear. Uh, MIFEL is taking US checks now, Banca MIFEL. They take around 10 business days to clear. So if something that can happen is if sometimes you live here, getting to navigate the wire transfers and so on with the American apps can be a bit tricky if you get a code and if you're no, because the apps track everything now. Where are you at the moment of making a transaction? Which device are you logged in from? All these patterns could get flagged. So checks are an option. Capital is now offering ACH transfers the way they used to. So you can send an ACH or a wire transfer and then receive it here, which is what Intercam used to do. So those two ways are very effective, and I say cover the needs of the majority of people. Uh, and there are also new platforms like Arc, which used to be called Dollar App. It's an app that is really simple. They don't use traditional dollars, they use a stable coin, which is a cryptocurrency basically pegged to the value of the dollar. So one USD stable coin is always $1. 1 euro stable coin is always €1. And this app allows you usually to move money between the US and Mexico the same way Capital or Wise would. The advantage of this platform is that if you open an account with them, you also get a clave to make Mexican transfers. So if you have another Mexican bank account, you could send money from there to your ARC clave, and then once it's there, you could send it back to the US for a lot cheaper than any bank. Or, I have this. this. Okay, so here, I have to sometimes send from Mexico to Canada. So I use ARC. I send from my Mexican bank capital to ARC. Then I have the US dollars. I send those to my US dollar account through Wise because Wise also has Canadian details. And then I can send an e-transfer to my Canadian account from Wise. It's the cheapest way, and it involves more steps, but at the same time, as I was saying earlier, I mean, right now is what is effective and what can work to help you solve your problem. So there are many ways to do this. I mean, here are just some examples because I think as we move into this wave of the financial system, it is important to adopt these digital tools in conjunction with banks. Like what I like about banks like Capital or Mifel, for instance, is I have a problem, I can text a person on WhatsApp. I know who I'm talking to, and I know I can have somebody who can help me sort a problem. Oh, do I have a transfer that hasn't gotten there yet? Okay, they can help me track it. I know I have a direct point of contact, and that is going to be so useful as we navigate these changes in the overall financial systems. Uh, just having human connections with the people who are inside the financial institutions in conjunction with the different technological tools that we can now use. So this is just an example. I mean, there are a lot of concerns Should I really take a selfie to sign up to WISE? Well, I think unfortunately, I mean, we will have to if we want to be a part of these platforms and use them. So the question is, do I get enough of a benefit to do that? That's a question for each person to answer. There's no one size fits all solution really. So uh, yeah, so basically, I mean, final message. If you understand, we live in the world that has record levels of mobility. People move from everywhere to everywhere, and that's just going to keep growing. I mean, I've seen here in San Miguel, we have people from Singapore, from Norway, from countries that didn't traditionally come here, moving here. Just in the past 2 months, I've seen that. So we're going to keep having that human movement, let's say. So if you understand the multiple systems, you can create more freedom ultimately and have a better quality of life, I mean, and just be prepared to deal with the hiccups and it's AI's fault. So thank you very much.